We all want to be happier, but how do we get there? First, we start by realizing happiness is not a destination. Being happy consists of micro action steps every single day. I'm your host, Brittany King, and I'm here to guide you along the way. Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back to the Positively Real podcast. It's your girl, your coach, your friend, Brittany King, and I'm so happy to be with you today. How are we doing? Last week, the episode, if you didn't listen to it, was my perfectly imperfect episode, B minus work. I just wanted to get something out to you because so many of the conversations I was having with people just trying to control what they cannot control. And it's so funny because literally right after I recorded that episode, I fell into the trap of trying to control things that I can't control, especially with my daughter. And it literally makes me miserable. And it's so counterproductive and not useful at all. And I'm grateful that I recorded that episode because I literally had all of that still in my brain. So I was able to redirect. But it's just funny because that's just life. We're just constantly trying to control things for a sense of safety. But when you can create safety within your body, you don't have to control those things or try to, because we can't control those things, especially other people. It's really tricky with children because you think you can control them and you can't. Actually, the other day I got a IV and the nurse was so wonderful, but it kept coming up on different topics that we were discussing of like feeling like she wants to have more control over things and whether that was her kids or her job or whatever. And I was like, dang, like, yeah, I think so many of us relate to that of like trying to do things so we feel in control because it gives us that sense of safety and security. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I recommend going back and listening to it. Also, it's just an example of like creating value without getting in your head about making things perfect. So, hi, so happy you're here. Um, it's funny because I've been on maternity leave and I've been, I created a lot of content front end and I've kind of been switching things up just to kind of meet people where they're at, meet myself where I'm at. And if you've been hanging out with me long enough, you know that gratitude is kind of a pillar in my life, a pillar in what I do. And every year, I think this might be the first year that I haven't done a gratitude challenge. I've done it every single year, whether that was like open community or within my client base. But this year I didn't put something together. And I've noticed there's tons of people doing gratitude stuff now, which is awesome. So it's like, I don't think I need another gratitude challenge. People are doing that. So what I wanted to talk about today is the flip side when gratitude feels impossible. And I'm going to say it right now. I definitely was one of those people that said, just be grateful, like toxic positivity of like, just be grateful. And yes, there's so much to be grateful for. However, it definitely minimizes how we're feeling in the moment. And I think it's really important to acknowledge when gratitude feels impossible. And then also this other side of like using gratitude to be complacent in our life. There's kind of these two different sides of gratitude. Like, yes, gratitude to me is the highest vibration. It is the most important thing to cultivate in our life because it is the foundation of abundance. And abundance is the opposite of scarcity, which is the opposite of fear. So I do believe having a gratitude practice and cultivating that is super important. And it's also important to understand why gratitude feels unattainable in certain moments and know that this is a common human experience. And if that's you or it has been you, that you're not alone and you aren't a bad person for not being grateful when you think you quote unquote should be. Anytime you say, I should be grateful, just pause and ask yourself why. Anytime we should on ourselves, it's not because we believe it, it's because someone else has either spewed that onto us or has told us that we should be grateful. And it's just not helpful. So, I we're going to talk about difficult emotions, and I just want you to know that it is okay to struggle with gratitude. It is okay. It is okay if you have all the things you could ever want in your life and you don't feel grateful in that very moment. It's okay. It is okay if you are up at 3 in the morning with a screaming baby or toddler and you don't feel grateful to be up when you want to be sleeping. Like you're not a bad person if you don't feel grateful all the time. So, what I want to talk about is this other side of gratitude. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons because I myself have found lately when I'm having a hard time of that like should voice in my head of you should be grateful and being like, yeah, okay, that's just not helpful right now because I'm also feeling this way. And it's really important to acknowledge that. So I want to kind of share a little bit about times where I've should on myself about being grateful and then some strategies to overcome the barriers to gratitude because gratitude is always accessible to us, but it's only really felt and it's really only authentic or embodied when you acknowledge like the things that's blocking you from feeling grateful. So let's talk about the barriers to gratitude. Some common obstacles to feeling grateful include anxiety. If you have a history of depression, a history of trauma, any sort of grief, or chronic stress. And so this is a very broad spectrum, right? There's like so much that goes like underneath each of these categories. But these are the common obstacles that make gratitude challenging. And, having different mental health conditions, and I don't even like using the word condition because all of these are symptoms, right? But this can impact one's ability to actually feel grateful, right? When we are struggling with our mental and emotional well being, how can we even access gratitude? So when someone tells you to just be grateful, it just creates this bigger divide, this bigger separation. And I don't know about you, I'm a little bit of a rebel. And so when someone tells me that I should do something, whether that's an external should or an internal should, I don't want to do it. It makes me not want to do it, truthfully. And so when someone tells me to just be grateful, it makes me not want to be grateful because I'm like, don't tell me what to do, whether that's my brain telling me that, right? Or if that's another person. And so we have these negative cognitive biases, and this is what creates this barrier. And the other thing that we experience is emotional numbness, right? Where we just don't feel anything. So trying to get ourselves from feeling numb to grateful is really a tall order. And in order to get to feeling grateful at some point, we have to work our way up the emotional scale. So going from numb to to grateful is just really unrealistic. But working your way up there, right, by feeling anger and feeling sadness and grief and all the emotions that are like piled on that's creating the numbness, you can work your way up there eventually, but it's most likely not going to happen in the blink of an eye when someone tells you to just be grateful. So, you know, I share a lot about when I've had a miscarriage, and my first miscarriage was in 2020. The second miscarriage that I had was in 2023. And there was a moment and when I had the second miscarriage where my brain just like went to that gratitude, like I'm grateful I have my daughter, I'm grateful of this, I'm grateful of that. But it was really minimizing the fact that like I'm going through something again that was really painful, really emotional. And I just remember so many times of like trying to like grateful myself out of feeling the negative emotion that I was feeling, which was grief and sadness and anger and confusion and all of those emotions. And I just remember trying to feel grateful, right? Looking at my daughter and being like, I want to be like grateful that I have my daughter, and which I was, but it was almost like a little inauthentic. And it was almost like not all the way. Like I could kind of feel grateful, but not really. And it wasn't until I allowed myself to feel the anger and the grief that I was actually able to access that feeling of gratitude when I was with my daughter, right? It's like it's such an interesting thing when you are grieving something and you also have to like show up and be the person that like people expect you to be. It's really difficult. And so I think that's where we end up numbing ourselves because we don't really have a choice. We have to just kind of move forward and smile and grin and bear it. But that creates that disconnect within ourself. And so I just want to normalize for you if you've gone through something that has been challenging in your life and you have a hard time finding the things that you're grateful for and you feel bad because everyone tells you that you should be grateful or gratitude is the emotion to lean into when you're going through a hard time and you can't access it. I just want you to know that I see you and I understand. I don't understand necessarily everything that you've gone through, but I understand what it's like to feel like something's wrong with you if you can't access the emotion of gratitude because everybody is telling you to just be grateful. And it's really, really tricky because when we don't allow ourselves to feel all of the emotions that come with being a human being, we really do block ourselves from feeling grateful. And I know this from experience. The breath work modality that I guide people and I facilitate is called elemental rhythm. And gratitude is a really big part of the experience. And I remember the first time I did the breath work experience as a participant. And I think it was the first time that I really felt the sensation, the felt sense of gratitude in my body. And it was overwhelming, truly. It was so powerful. Like I was bawling, just tears of joy. And I was like, could you imagine if like every time somebody told you to be grateful, like that would be our reaction? Like tears of joy, like would be incredible. But like it's very intense. Like to feel that overwhelming sense of gratitude is it's not easy to feel it. Truthfully, it's difficult to feel because we're just not used to feeling that way. And that's why I love guiding that breath work so people can have the felt sense of gratitude and then they can access that feeling of gratitude, the warmth in their heart and in their body when they're feeling grateful. So, I want to talk about why gratitude can sometimes feel out of reach. And I want to talk about societal factors like toxic positivity that can compound feelings of guilt or inadequacy when you struggle with feeling grateful. So, how does mental health challenges interfere with gratitude? You know, in the realm of depression and anxiety, it impacts our perception. It impacts how we see the world, right? We already have negativity bias. That's why we love gratitude because it helps counteract that negativity bias. But when you are in a state of depression, like negativity bias is the lens that you view the whole world, which makes it really difficult to recognize any positive aspects of life. The other side of it is that emotional numbness that I mentioned earlier. You can feel emotionally numb, which is a common symptom of depression, which blocks you from feeling grateful. Like I said, you cannot access gratitude when you are not allowing yourself to feel all the emotions that are compounding that is creating this numbness in your body. And then anxiety. Oh, good old anxiety, which, anxiety is a very important emotion. It keeps us alive. It keeps us um, aware, alert, right? But it also has us focus on future worries that most likely will not happen. And that prevents us from appreciating what's right in front of us. The other side of this is trauma and PTSD, whether that's big T, little t, if you have complex PTSD, which is what I have from my childhood. For most of your life, you're in survival mode. And past trauma keeps the brain in a constant state of being alert, making it really hard to relax and feel grateful. Because how can you feel grateful, right, in the moment, just in case something terrible might happen? And just being in that constant fight or flight state, it's exhausting. The other side of this is having trust issues. If you have experienced trauma, it can lead to a distrust of others and the world, which then in turn affects our ability to feel thankful. And the other side of this is the chronic stress and burnout. And, this is the area that I work the most with my clients is about how to overcome that chronic stress, how to bounce back from burning out. And when we are in a state of cognitive overload, right? Constant stress depletes our mental resources, which makes any sort of positive reflection really challenging, right? It totally fries our nervous system. When we have that allostatic load build up, build up, build up, and then come crashing down, it's very hard to think about all the things we're grateful for when we're just trying to get by, right? The other part of this is feeling physically exhausted, right? Noticing how hard it is to have any capacity for gratitude when physically your body cannot handle much else than what it already has, whatever else it's holding, right? So physical fatigue impacts emotional well-being, which ultimately doesn't leave space for having gratitude. Again, breath work is incredible because it clears all that out. So then you can bring in that feeling of gratitude. So, in the term, like in the sense of like what's going on in our brain, like why is it feel impossible at times to feel grateful? When we are going through a hard time, our brain chemicals are literally changing, right? So there's an imbalance within our brain structure, and lower levels of serotonin and dopamine can affect our mood and feelings of satisfaction. And when we have elevated cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone from the chronic stress that we talked about earlier, this can impair cognitive function related to positivity. And when you are in this constant state of fight or flight, when you have overloaded your nervous system and you're in that sympathetic state way too long, you are cutting off access to your higher thinking, which is where you can access gratitude, where you can access thoughts that will make you feel grateful. So when your body is flooded with stress hormones, it's like cutting that pathway off. The other thing that impacts our ability to feel gratitude at times is just habitual thought patterns, right? Negative thinking. The more that we have a negative thought and the more we think this thought over and over again, the more it strengthens the neural pathway. So it's like you've thought something so many times over and over again. Thinking about something that makes you feel grateful one time is not going to be strong enough to rewire that circuit. You're going to have to think those thoughts that make you feel grateful over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until you can build a new neural pathway. And it takes a ton of time. The other thing that impacts our ability to feel gratitude is neuroplasticity. So, this is the brain's ability to reorganize itself. And if you don't have a practice in place, if you don't have an intentional practice to build new positive pathways, it's going to make it much more challenging to feel gratitude from time to time. So, that is how our mental health challenges impact our ability to feel grateful. Now, I want to talk about societal pressure and toxic positivity because I do think that this has a big role in making people feel guilty about not feeling grateful. I do think there is a cultural expectation, and I think a lot of it comes down to social media. I mean, online personas create unrealistic standards for happiness and what we have in our life. Like, if we didn't have this influence, would we feel the way that we feel? There's tons of studies about it. We know that it has a negative impact on our mental health. We know this, yet we're still on it day in and day out. And I'm talking to myself as well. Like, it is amazing how quickly you can fall off whatever good emotion you're feeling when you consume something on social media. I know this happened to me the other day. My son has been sleeping really, really well. He's been in his crib since day one. We have like a sleep protocol for him, and it's gone really, really well. And then and it's been amazing. And I saw on my social media like reasons why I don't do XYZ and da 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 and our sleep training. And it literally made me feel so terrible. I literally was like, I'm a terrible mom. I shouldn't have put him in his crib. I should be sleeping with him. Like, literally, my brain was just like going, blah, 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 like just a downward spiral. I know this is a silly example, but it's just how quickly these things can happen. We can be feeling really good and feeling really grateful, and then we can see one thing and it can just knock us off. So I do think that this has a big impact in our ability to actually feel grateful. And that's where we fall into the comparison trap, right? We're constantly comparing ourselves to others. This exacerbates the feelings of inadequacy. So it's really hard to feel grateful when we're feeling inadequate. And I would say gratitude is an antidote if you can access it. If you cannot access the feeling of gratitude, it doesn't matter if you know that it's the opposite of feeling inadequate, right? The opposite of feeling anxious. If you can't access it or have a hard time like really feeling it, it's gonna kind of perpetuate this cycle of feeling bad about not being able to feel it. And then let's talk about toxic positivity, because I will say I'm very guilty of being a toxic positivity spewer before I really understood this work. I was the just be happy. I don't know, like, I don't have tolerance for people that are having a hard time when, like, they just need a change in their perspective. Oh, yeah, I've learned a lot since those days. And, giving myself a lot of grace because I was labeled the happy one. So I was just assumed that I always had to be happy and I always had to choose positive thoughts and I always had to just brush over and bypass the negative. Um, but I wasn't really living an authentic life. I was living a partial, this is who I am, but also wearing a mask at the same time. So toxic positivity is essentially minimizing someone's experience. It's kind of goes aligned with gaslighting, right? Minimizing how someone feels and telling them to just be positive and that everything is going to be okay. And the problem with this is it dismisses genuine, real emotions. And I'm learning this more and more with my toddler because, like, a lot of times these meltdowns come from when we don't acknowledge how they really feel, or we minimize, or we think it's funny, or we think it's silly that they're having a meltdown about a crayon color. When we dismiss general emotions in a toddler, they freak out even more. And so this is how it works with adults too. Like when we dismiss how someone genuinely feels, it creates this disconnect between us and them. And this also creates that disconnect with being able to feel grateful. Emotional suppression is also something that happens when we just focus on the positive, right? So, suppressing negative feelings can lead to increased stress and decreased well being. And then it also can lead to guilt and shame. So, societal pressures to always look on the bright side can make individuals feel so guilty for their real, authentic feelings. Now, I do believe there is a silver lining. We can always find a silver lining, but sometimes it's not in the moment. It's not when it's happening. I think sometimes silver linings come years sometimes after really hard times. We can look and have perspective in hindsight. But just looking on the bright side, especially when we're having an emotional experience, is just not helpful. It's just not helpful. So, many people struggle with feeling grateful, even when they believe they should. So, if that is you, I just want you to know that I see you and it's okay if you don't feel grateful. If you have the dream life, you have the husband and the family and the job and all the things you could ever imagine wanting in your life, and sometimes you don't feel grateful, it is okay. I see you. I just want you to know that that is a normal part of being a human. Negative emotions are a part of the human experience. And so when you can honor the negative emotions, it will allow you to access gratitude. It will allow you to access those feelings, but you can't get there until you allow yourself to feel the difficult emotions, to feel the anger, to feel the sadness, to feel the grief. When I've gone through, and I mean, I've been like, I'm thick in it. I'm thick in postpartum, right? And there are some highs and lows, and I do feel so grateful for this life. And I'm so grateful that I have a practice that allows me to actually feel all of my emotions because I know that I wouldn't be able to feel the way that I feel. And I'll share the first time I did my breathwork experience in person after having my daughter, when I had so much postpartum anxiety, it was like crippling at times, and it was stealing the joy of the present moment because I was always worried about what terrible thing could happen. And, I smiled because like some of the scary intrusive thoughts I had were so intense. Um, but it of course made sense why I couldn't really feel grateful because I was so riddled with anxiety after having my daughter. But after I did my first breathwork breakthrough experience, I remember sitting there in the meditation, flooded with gratitude, with love, with joy. all the emotions that were, it's almost like they were just sitting right there waiting for me to feel all the sadness, to feel the fear, to feel the grief, to feel everything else that was coming up. But I had suppressed all of that, which then I think exacerbated the anxiety that I was feeling as well, because I didn't want to address any of it, which then was bubbling up, bubbling up, bubbling up. And it was almost like there was this veil that was lifted. And as soon as I felt all the negative, difficult emotions, I was flooded with all the feel good emotions that were just like waiting for me. They're like, we're here too. We want to come in. And I'm so grateful to have that experience. And ever since then, when I do my breath work practice, I always have a piece of gratitude with it, because actually can access it within my body, because I have that embodied experience. And I wouldn't have been able to do that unless I felt the difficult emotions. Okay. So accepting negative feelings as a part of the human experience can help you overcome any barriers that you might have to feeling grateful. Mindfulness practice, right? Focusing on the present moment without judging yourself. And then also challenging negative thought patterns. Like when you do have a negative thought, challenge it, look at it, observe it, know that that thought's not you. It's just a sentence in your mind. Know that the feeling that it's producing is not all of you, it's just a part of you. And the more that you can acknowledge that, the easier it will become to overcome the barrier to feeling grateful. So, what can we do from here? Start small. If you've been struggling with feeling grateful lately, I want you to just focus on one small positive thing a day. Even if it's that I woke up, right? Even if it's just I had a meal on my table, and start really there, because it's so simple that we brush it off, but the smaller the practice, the more manageable it is, the more that it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows, okay? And the other side of this is, I cannot stress this enough, to be kind to yourself during hard times. If you're having a hard time accessing gratitude, that means you're going through it right now, my friend. And beating yourself up and judging yourself and being hard on you is going to get you through it any faster. The only way out is through. And if you're trying to like be hard on yourself because you're not grateful, right? You're not grateful to have a roof over your head, and you're not grateful to have food on the plate, it's okay. So really be so kind to yourself during whatever you're going through, whatever season that you're in. Now, if you're going through a really hard time, make sure you seek out professional help, right? Therapy, coaching. There are people that are here to support you. Also, having community support is everything. Someone that you trust, that you feel safe with. And of course, there's always organizations and groups online that can also help. Just be really intentional and mindful about the groups that you connect with. So that's what I have for you today, my friend. I really want to hone in on this idea of acknowledging and processing all emotions, not just the positive one, is the key to accessing gratitude, and learning how to accept your feelings, right? While maintaining hope for the future, right? So being able to balance, find harmony between acceptance and hope, knowing that what you're feeling right now is not final, and that if you allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, that the future will be better. I know at those tough times, it does not seem like it, but you can even think in this moment of another time that you had a hard time that going through, you were going through a difficult season, that you got out of it and became better in the future. Sometimes just accessing that memory can give you the motivation and the empowerment to do this really, really, really important work. So I'll leave you with this, because it reminds me, I remind myself of this time and time again. The wound is the place where the light enters you. That's a Rumi quote. And I do believe we need to crack in order to see the light. And so if you're kind of feeling like you're cracking or things are breaking down around you, that's how the light gets in. Okay. And so that light is that feeling of gratitude, but you have to acknowledge the cracks first. You have to go into the wound first with so much love and compassion. All right, my friend, that's what I have for you today. I hope that you have a beautiful day. If you are feeling thrown by this gratitude season and you're not feeling very grateful, I just want you to know again, I see you, I love you, and you're not alone. Okay. There are people out there that want to support you. There are people out there that are there for you. You just have to have the courage to ask. All right, my friend, until next time, remember to love yourself, own your happiness, and let your light shine because you're so worthy of it. Until next time.